What's good, meaningful movers? Welcome back to Moving with Meaning, the podcast, where actions have meaning, words have meaning, and we open up the conversations to discover what's your next move. I'm your host, Krystal. In today's episode, we are going to talk numbers, specifically betting against the house and beating the odds. These are my favorite episodes because the deeper you go, the deeper the connection. But you know how we do it here. We need to set that theme, so let's go ahead and do that. The word of the day is steak. I'm not talking a filet mignon at a 5-star restaurant. Nah, I mean the level of risk to harm or loss if an action, decision, or circumstance does not go exactly as expected. Is it what's in it for me or what's in it for them? That's enough of me talking. How about we introduce our guest? And there's no one better to do that than herself, Amanda. Why don't you give the people a bit of background about yourself and what you're going to share with us today?
I absolutely love you, and I'm so excited to be here. I want to get that out first. So my title on my business card says that I am an author, artist, speaker, and survivor. What it doesn't say is that I'm also a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, brand new grandma, and a cat mom to 5 cats. I mean, I got a house full. I got a lot going on. But the part that always kind of raises eyebrows is when people ask me, author, artist, speaker, survivor. What are you a survivor of? I'm a survivor of human trafficking 3 times. So that's mainly what we're going to be talking about today.
I don't think there's enough focus on trafficking at all whatsoever. We talk about the war on drugs and poverty, and all those are great things, but geez, trafficking is a big thing. One of the things I want to get out first is when we talked, I called it sex trafficking, and you corrected me and said, let's go back. This is human trafficking. So tell me about why you refer to it as human trafficking instead.
There's so much more to it than just sex trafficking. For one thing, sex trafficking, the sex industry side of trafficking only makes up about 14% of what trafficking actually is and what it looks like. It's just what we talk about here because sex sells is a buzzword. But when you say it's sex trafficking, you are negating all of the things that people are going through when it comes to trafficking, and you're taking the humanity out of it. I refer to myself as being a survivor of human trafficking because first and foremost, I'm a human. I am not a sex object. I was treated as one for a very long time. But sex trafficking, it takes out all of the ideas of incest, rape, stranger rape, blitz rape, acquaintance rape, child sex abuse, serial rape, gang rape, statutory rape, substance facilitated rape, domestic violence, and all kinds of devastating impacts that involves in human trafficking when you're talking about sex trafficking. Sex boils it down to something simple, and it's not simple.
I mean, I don't know. Did you read that? Because that was good. Like, you got your stuff together, so we in for a good treat here, folks. So let's talk about the beginning, how we got here. You're a survivor of severe child abuse. There's a background in that, right?
Absolutely. That's the case with most people that have survived human trafficking. We've experienced some kind of childhood trauma. And I say most because not all, but the vast majority, yes. So my mother was mentally and emotionally abusive. My father was physically abusive. And my brother was the first person to ever molest me. And I was only 4 at the time. This was my entire family.
Yeah.
My dad was in the military. I was actually born in Germany. We moved all over the place. We moved on average every 3 to 5 years. I didn't really have people in my life who were stable people. They were not there long term. Even extended family wasn't really family. They weren't really there. There was nobody that was there for me. I was the youngest in the family. That was everybody that I knew was my mom, my dad, and my brother. That was my world. When you grow up in an environment like that, and this is what's happening every single day, you eventually start to train yourself and teach yourself that the people who love you are going to hurt you. And if they don't hurt you, that means they don't love you.
That's an interesting perspective too. And what's interesting about this is you're the youngest. I've always heard this, to be honestly, either from an only child or the oldest that has had this. So this is a very good perspective that, hey, all bets are off. Like, it is open game. Now, you mentioned something about your mother putting you on drugs illegally as a child.
When I was molested the first time, I was 4. When that happened, my brother had done it to me. Looking back now, I recognize that he was only 3.5 years older than me. So he was like 7. There's no way he should have known the things about human anatomy that he did at that age. Nobody was teaching him that in our household that I'm aware of. Nobody was teaching him that in school at all. So where is he picking up this information? We both started acting out around that same time, which is a sign of sexual abuse. It's a sign of any kind of abuse. But there was this miracle drug that had come out a couple years prior to that. And we're talking, this is like 1984 when this happened. This miracle drug was helping people to have better control over their children, and their children were sitting up and paying more attention in class. And my mom, being the wise soul that she was, decided that she wanted to see if she could get her kids this drug. So she took us into the doctor, who said that I was fine, but my brother had ADHD. So they gave him Ritalin, which is legal speed, basically.
Yeah.
When they put him on Ritalin, she still didn't believe the doctors when they said that I was fine. So she started breaking my brother's pills in half and giving them to me every day also at 4. A year later, she took me off of it for a couple of days, and she took me back into the doctor to see if they would give me my own prescription. So here I am, a 5-year-old going through drug withdrawals and who has already been experiencing sexual abuse for the last year. Of course, they gave me my own prescription. Fast forward to last year, I finally discovered that the majority of people, something like over 90% of all people who were diagnosed in the 1980s as having ADD or ADHD, were survivors of early childhood trauma.
Wow.
They were slapping a Band-Aid on the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. Okay. And I don't mean to interject sarcasm, but my daughter was acting out and I knew nothing was going on, but I was like, you think we need to go get her checked and get her to calm down? I really thought she needed that because her mind was just racing. She had so much going on, and she was a very social individual. She was very active in her school and her community. So everything that was going on in school and life, it was just, I have a lot I want to accomplish and I want to do all these things. That's all it was.
Yeah. She was driven.
Right? Now we're trying to impose, okay, well, you got some chores to do. This was like impacting her thought process because she was very organized. So that's interesting. Gosh, girl. Okay. All right. And I ain't gonna lie, when we were growing up too, that's what my mom would say. Do not get your kids on Ritalin. I don't care if they say anything about it. Same thing. They just give these kids this medicine without even sending them to a therapist or digging further into it. They're just trying to treat these symptoms without trying to give us or inform us of things, because it could be autism. They could be on the spectrum. It could be many things outside of just acting out.
Yep. I got tired of the Band-Aids.
How long did you stay up on these drugs, girl?
Until I started running away from home. When I was 15 is when I started running away. So I'd been on this legally for 10 years. But, pack on that 1 year that was prior to that, I'd been on Ritalin for 11 years. And the first time I ran away from home, I had already experienced a lot of other abuses and stuff. I was molested repeatedly by total strangers, by an uncle, by marriage, by a guy in a public parking lot in the middle of the day. Nobody was there for me. I felt so isolated. I started running away and trying to find some way to be able to take care of myself, because clearly it wasn't going to happen by anybody else. And when I left, I didn't take the Ritalin with me. So I started going through these drug withdrawals. I was gone for 2 weeks before the cops found me and dragged me back home and gave me back to my parents. My parents decided to take me into a psychiatrist at that point, and they had gone to see the psychiatrist first to prep the psychiatrist to tell them everything that I had been up to, which was mainly a pack of lies. My father had said that I had been doing some illegal drugs since I was 13. No, I'd been doing it since I was 4. But he also told them that I had been sexually active, and I hadn't. I was still a really naive, fairly innocent kid. I was not sexually active, even though I had been molested multiple times. I had not yet been raped. I had not yet gone through that side of things. I'd been molested. I didn't like it. I wanted away from these people.
Yep.
My dad spun that. So they went in and told all of this to the psychiatrist, and they told her that I was depressed and I had major anxiety issues and that there was something seriously wrong with me. So the first thing that happened when I walked in that room was the doctor tried to set me up with Klonopin and Paxil and Prozac and these really psychotropic drugs that alter your entire state of being.
Yep, they do. Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to take any of those, so I was flushing those down the toilet every day because my mother decided to start counting my pills to make sure I was taking my pills.
Let me just point out this obvious real quick. This is just... So she was more attentive on you taking your pills than being more attentive to you emotionally as my daughter.
Yeah.
What do you need from me, baby?
My mother didn't know how to be emotional towards her daughter. I remember a boy broke up with me in school when I was in the 5th grade and I went home crying. And she told me to suck it up. Stop crying. You look like a baby. Do you know how ugly you look when you cry? You shouldn't ever cry. And if you ever cry, you should be crying by yourself because nobody wants to see this.
Man. Yeah.
There is a picture, a Polaroid picture of me somewhere. My mother took many of them. She would grab out her Polaroid camera and take a picture of me while I was crying, whether I was at the dining table, whether I was in my bedroom, if I was getting dressed fresh out of the shower. She would take these Polaroid photos of me crying to prove to me how ugly I was. And to this day, I have a difficult time crying in front of anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. Man. So for me, crying was weakness. For you, crying translated to what?
Weakness, ugliness. Nobody would love that. Nobody would want to be around that.
Gosh, that takes away so much from you. But even when you're with your husband who wants to comfort you, he has no way of knowing when you're sad and needs that.
Right.
Okay. I'm not going to take this away. Let's keep moving.
So the second thing that psychiatrist did was she told me that I was struggling with a relationship with my father, and that if I wanted to have a decent relationship with my father, or indeed with any man, that I needed to like what they like, because men are not wired to make that effort. Women have to be the ones to make that effort. So if your dad likes going out and shooting guns, go shoot guns with your dad. If your dad likes driving old cars and going to the car shows, go to the car shows with your dad. Do the things that he likes to do, and you will form a deeper relationship, a better bond with your father. This screwed me up for years.
Oh my God. So you're mirroring things that you have no interest in. And let's just say you did do that, right? You're doing that. What happens if you didn't get any attention from your dad? So now you're thinking, okay, I'm doing it wrong. What if you weren't getting anything, as far as attention from men that you were interested in?
Then I need to try harder. It's up to me. Except it did actually work with my father, which actually screwed me up a little bit more. To this day, I know more about cars than my husband does. I became quite proficient at target shooting for a very long time. I could have gotten into competitions and won competitions. I just chose not to because it wasn't my passion.
Yeah.
But I am good at those things. But what does that mean for my life? Where has that served me in this life at all?
I don't know. I mean, you tell me. What? I'm looking at you as an expert here. Like, okay. Okay, that happened, right, with your dad. And so how long did that happen before you kind of was like, I need to get up out of here, and then we hit human trafficking?
Well, as far as getting out of there, it was probably a couple weeks. I bounced back and forth. I ran away constantly. The cops kept dragging me home. I actually turned 17 in a foster home. 2 days after I turned 18, I had a plane ticket to leave the state.
You bought it?
No, a boy that I'd met bought it.
Oh.
I liked all the things that he liked. Of course he bought me that plane ticket.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this guy had bought me a plane ticket for my birthday. He was over the age of 18, so of course he wasn't willing to have any kind of a relationship before that for legal reasons. Mm-hmm. And he sent me this plane ticket, and I told my father, I need a ride to the airport, and if you're not willing to give me one, I will go find one of my own. So my dad decided, okay, I'll give you a ride to the airport.
Didn't care where you were going? Why? Nothing?
Not really. They just... At that point, I had been in so much trouble that I think they were just looking forward to getting rid of me. I was a lot of trouble. I was constantly grounded. They had taken everything away from me and tried their best to break me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to the point where I had a mattress on the floor and that was my bedroom. I didn't even have a door on my bedroom. I didn't have bookshelves. I didn't have books. I didn't have pen and paper unless I brought it home from school. And I had one change of clothes. When I came home from school, I'd have to change into a nightgown to wash my school clothes so I could wear that same jeans and that same t-shirt to school the next day.
Girl.
I had nothing.
Okay. Well,
So,
I mean,
yeah, they didn't care.
it's hard to say, well, why aren't you staying there? Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I remember one day I had a conversation with them. I had gotten in trouble for something else I did or didn't know, and I don't even remember what it was. But they'd asked me to sit at the dining room table, and this was shortly before I turned 18. And they were talking about what the next punishment was going to be. Was I going to tear down the patio outside, or was I going to re-roof this section, or was I going to do the drywall in my dad's auto shop, or what was my punishment going to do? Was I going to scrub out the trash cans with a toothbrush? Was I going to go to military school? These were the punishments my parents were throwing back and forth across the table like a ping pong ball while I was sitting there watching them.
Yeah.
And at the very end of them throwing all these ideas back and forth, they said, well, what do you think? And I said, really? You want to know what I think? They said, yeah, we want your input. And I said, okay, I don't care what you do to me anymore. You have done all of these things, and I lined them out, trying to break me, trying to break my spirit, and trying to make me into a puppet. And you have failed. I will not break. You can't do it now. You didn't do it then. You're not going to do it in the future. And I got up and I walked away from the table, and I was absolutely convinced my father was going to murder me.
Yep.
And he didn't murder me. I left them completely stunned. They had no idea what had just happened. It was the first time in my life I had ever stood up for myself. I was so stupidly proud. I was shaking because I was terrified, but I was grinning ear to ear, walking away from them going, I know they can't see my smile. Damn, that felt good. So on the way to the airport, my dad was giving me the ride. We stopped off at a Cracker Barrel and we were having breakfast, and he told me, we were having a pleasant conversation. All of a sudden he just interjected. Your mom and I were talking last night. She said she gives you 6 months before you come crawling back to us. I said, I give you 3. And I knew right then that no matter what I did or what situation I ended up in, I would not be crawling back to them. I would not be asking them for help, period.
Yeah.
So the first time I found myself being trafficked, I was 18 years old, and I could not turn to my parents for help because they didn't care in the first place.
Well, so what was this first time like trafficking? Because what I hear about trafficking is that they dope you up so you can't do anything anyway. They isolate you and they instill this fear of you to reach out, and they do this dependence trauma on you. Were you in that kind of position? Or was it a little, I don't want to say like lighter, because nothing about this is light, but where you had like freedom to call home?
There are so many different scenarios and mind games when it comes to trafficking. I mean, the very bare bones basic definition of it, I always tell people, don't go and look it up on Wikipedia or Google, because these are fallible resources that are run by humans who do not make the laws. Mm-hmm. My definition comes from the Department of Homeland Security, because this is a pretty stable website, it's a pretty stable law that's written.
Yeah.
And it talks about human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain commercial sex acts or labor from another person. So force, fraud, or coercion. Force would be where you're chaining somebody to the floor, right?
Okay.
Or you're forcing them to do it in order to receive drugs from you if you're their dealer. That's force. Fraud would be like promising somebody $10,000 to perform in a pornography and then not getting paid for it.
Oh, okay.
Coercion is the most common. Coercion is where it comes from a romantic relationship, which is more than 50% of all cases of human trafficking here in the U.S. And it's where this romantic relationship, this person says, well, if you love me, you'll do this for me. And it starts with something small. You'll make dinner for me. You will go to the store for me and go pick up a bottle of NyQuil because I'm sick and I'm dying. You know how men are when they're sick. Or, you know, it starts out small like that, and it gets bigger and bigger. And eventually, as was my case, I was living with a man who was more than twice my age. Red flags already. I didn't know it at the time, but he had ties to organized crime and was a well-known drug dealer in the area that I wasn't aware of.
Oh.
And his buddy came over and asked if we wanted to go to Las Vegas for his birthday party, for his birthday weekend. And my boyfriend at the time says, well, I can't go because I have to work. But she's free. She can go with you. So why don't you take her with you? Amanda, do you want to go to Vegas? You can get all expense paid trip to Vegas. It's like, I'm only 18, but I've been to New York, and I've ridden the roller coaster at the top there of that casino. I would love to do that again. And they have a whole arcade there just for kids. I would love this. Yes, I would love to go.
Yeah.
We got there. The front desk was paid off to not ask any questions. I was taken up to the room, not given a room key, and locked up for 52 hours. If I left that room, I wouldn't have been able to get back in. I would not have been able to get back to where I was living to get any of my stuff. This guy kept my ID card for me to be able to get on and off of the plane.
Oh my God.
And for 52 hours, I was allowed to order room service only once per day. They had strict instructions to leave it outside the door and walk away before I retrieved it, not ask any questions about who I was and what I was doing there. And this guy, my boyfriend, told me before we ever left, don't forget to be as accommodating for him as you are for me. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. This guy would come into the room. He would eat off of the tray, whatever it was that I had ordered, rape me or molest me in some way, and either go back to gambling or go to sleep for a little while. And it would start over again.
Girl. So it didn't dawn on the people in the hotel that were bringing you these meals. Hey, drop up and leave. They just did it?
They just did it. This hotel is now no longer in existence.
Okay.
But I was watching a movie the other day, and this hotel's logo was in the film because it was a 20-year-old movie. And I saw that hotel. And the second I saw it, I felt a momentary breakdown sneaking up in me. Like I was going to burst into tears and scream. And it was the most bizarre thing because it was gone in less than a second. But it was there. It had been there.
Oh
it existed in me just like that part of my life existed in the past.
Yeah, that happens.
Right. It's so important to recognize that is what we call triggering.
Yeah.
That is something that is being triggered. My husband and I were talking on our way to the chiropractor just this morning about how being triggered is such a buzzword now. I cracked a joke. I said something about, I dropped my latte. I'm triggered. My husband laughed so hard he swerved on the road. It was awesome.
Girl, you crazy. Okay, so...
Yeah, but I make you laugh.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good to keep this going light because this is deep.
Yes.
How long were you there before you got back?
I was there for 52 hours, and then we got on our flight and went back to Arizona. We got back to Arizona, and the first thing I started doing was putting together a plan on how to get out of there. Where was I going to go? Who was I going to stay with? I was working at a convenience store as a cashier at the time. That was about the best I could do. I was a high school dropout, had no college education, had nothing to back me up, no way to support myself. One of my customers, regular customer, had developed a massive crush on me, and I used it to my advantage. I told this guy one day, this is what's happened to me. I'm not happy. I need to leave, and I feel like I'm in danger. He took that to mean, I want to be your girlfriend. Let me move in with you.
Okay. Not so many words.
I'm talking about stuff that I never talk about in podcasts. This is fun.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Look, I'm glad you is what it is here. So let's go. Let's do it.
So this guy, I won't go into too many details, but he was even older than the other one.
Oh.
Like by far older than the other one. Like twice his age. But this guy would do anything for me. So he took me in, and I stayed with him for a little while. Well, he wasn't exactly rich, but okay.
Okay.
He gave me a roof over my head. He made sure I was fed. And he had enough money that he sent me to go visit my grandmother, my mom's mom in Arkansas. And that meant everything to me. I desperately wanted to be around family. I was so alone and so isolated in the world, and I was so broken. And he sent me to go and stay with her. And while I was there, I met this guy, because this is the way that my life worked back then. That's all it was. It was one man after another after another. If they weren't going to rape me, the only thing I could do was give myself away earlier than that so that they didn't hurt me, so that I felt like it was my choice.
With this guy?
It was with all men.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So this guy fell madly in love with me at a VFW dance. I was hanging out with my grandmother and he asked her to dance and she's like, For one thing, she towered over him. My grandmother was like 6 feet tall. This guy was an inch shorter than me. I'm 5'6". So she's like, that ain't happening, boy. So he says, well, then would you mind if I ask your daughter to dance? Thinking that would be a compliment to either of us. And it was not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my grandmother was not exactly young when she had my mother. She was in her late 30s, early 40s. So my grandmother was considerably elderly at that time.
Yeah.
And he asked me to dance. He turned out to be pretty much exactly twice my age. Can you say daddy issues?
Yeah. I'm like, and I'm as you're talking, I'm thinking about, it's not a surprise, right? Because of how your mom told you. Oh, no one's gonna want you unless you do these things. And then the psychiatrist like double downs on that.
Yeah.
I'm not judging you or anything like that. I can see the appeal. I can see the allure. I can see the draw of, like, this is what I know. This is what I know.
Right. This is what I'm looking for acceptance from.
Yeah.
And I hated my brother's guts. So, I never got along with anybody my own age, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah.
My mom's friends were my friends.
Wow.
That's how it worked. I was so bullied in school. I really didn't have many friends my own age. My mom was part of the NCO wives clubs, the non-commissioned officers on military base. And they would get together and do like bake sales and stuff. And I would go to all these bake sales with my mom. And I was friends with all these other women that were in their 30s and 40s.
Did you have better relationships with them than you did your mom?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's good.
One of them from her aerobics class, I one day accidentally called her grandma. Everybody at the table got a really great big laugh out of it. And she says, oh, honey, that's all right. You can call me grandma. I'll be your grandma. I loved her.
Oh,
they were wonderful. But it's no wonder I was attracted to older men because my deepest relationship was with these women who were twice my age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was one of them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of psychology that goes into all this stuff, and the abuse and all that stuff feeds into it as well. Looking for that constant acceptance and feeling like my father was distant. He was physically abusive and he had a year remote tour in Alaska when I was 7, 8 years old and we couldn't go with him. Felt abandoned by my dad. There's all of this stuff that kind of feeds into this, into my old personality of this person who was constantly looking for love and acceptance from the older generation of people that were old enough to be my parents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gosh. Okay. So back to number 2.
We'll call them that. We'll call them that. Yeah. It's probably closer to double digits. But we won't go there yet. So I married this guy when I was 19.
Oh.
He turned out to be really abusive. I was working at a horse farm and I left him to go live on the horse farm in a guest house. And while I was there working at the horse farm, I fell out of the hayloft and injured myself really badly. I needed surgery on my knee. I'd torn some cartilage, pretty nasty. The boss had a secondary horse farm in another state. And he took me to and from the doctors and he found out what had happened with my relationship, my marriage. He was the one who gave me the guest house on the horse farm to live at because he knew that I was in trouble and I needed help. He was the first person to really reach out and offer any kind of assistance. His name was Josh Green, and I will forever remember this man.
Yeah.
There was one night right before we had decided that I had to leave the state to get the surgery because my ex-husband kept on floating around the horse farm and looking for me. I wasn't going to have any freedom. And he cooked a meal and he said, I want you to come over and eat because I want us to sit down and talk for a little while. He didn't mean anything by it. And it's the first time that had ever happened. Yeah. He was a Vietnam War vet. And he told me the story of when he was captured in Vietnam and tortured. And I knew the only reason that he was telling me that story was because he knew I was a safe person for him to be vulnerable around. I was a safe person for him to be able to talk to. And that if he felt that way toward me, maybe him sharing with me would make me feel that comfortable with him too. Yeah. He knew there was something deeper going on with me and I needed someone to talk to.
Oh, wow.
He told me that once I got the knee surgery done, he wanted me to go to work at his other horse farm because I would be safer there in the other state. And if I knew anybody in that same state, that maybe I might be able to find somewhere to stay while I was down there recuperating from the surgery until I could get on my feet and start working for him again. My dad's mother lived in Florida. My plan was that I'd already contacted her and everything. My plan was I was going to go down there and stay with her while I got my knee surgery and while I recuperated and finally get to know this woman who had been completely out in the wind the whole time I was growing up. And I got down to Daytona Beach. I was sitting in the bus station and I called her to say, hey, I'm here. It was about 10:30 at night. Hey, I'm here. I'm ready for you guys to come and get me. And I don't know where you live because I don't know this area. And, you know, this is 1999. So there's no like GPSs on mobile phones. I'm standing there in a payphone holding up a phone book, you know, one of those big things that a lot of kids used to be able to use as booster seats in the old movies.
Yeah.
So when I called the phone to ask them to come and get me, her husband, my dad's stepfather, answered the phone. And what I received was, we're not coming to get you. You're on your own. Good luck. I had $5 in my pocket. I didn't know what happened. It took me years to find out that the whole reason this happened was because my parents found out and they called my grandmother and said, she's running away again. And if you take her in, we will never speak to you again.
As a grandma, I'd be like, well, damn you. Because my grandbaby got to come. My grandbaby's got to be somewhere. That's what?
My father raised us the way he was raised. That's all I'll say about that.
Okay. Now that makes sense. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was Amanda to do? And that's part 1 of Amanda Blackwood's episode. I hope you are being drawn into quite the tale of trauma. Tune in for part 2 to see where Amanda's story takes us. Make sure you guys subscribe to the show, Moving With Me in the podcast, and tap that alert bell so you know when these episodes drop. I am on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Please share, like, repost, and follow. Tag someone. We are creating a community here. Quick housekeeping before you go. Follow me on Instagram at movingwithmeaning82. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. I do dabble in TikTok at Krystal B. Clark. Lastly, run over to my YouTube channel and have a look or two. Links are in the episode. Alrighty, I'm Krystal on Moving With Meaning the podcast, reminding you to take it one step at a time. All moves have meaning. Check y'all later.